In a few months, I'll reach the milestone of turning 18, and there's been an unexpected twist in my family dynamics. Let me paint the scene for you. I reside in the house formerly owned by my biological father, who passed away when I was just 6 years old. Although my parents were never married, upon his passing, he bequeathed the house to me. Consequently, my mother and I have made it our home ever since. Several years after my father's demise, my mother ventured into the dating world again, and that's when my stepfather entered the picture. They tied the knot, and he became a part of our household. Initially, everything seemed smooth sailing until recently. The crux of the matter lies in a misunderstanding that persisted for quite some time regarding the ownership of the house. My stepfather was under the impression that the house belonged to my mother, which, at first glance, seemed inconsequential. However, this misconception led to an awkward exchange not long ago. As my 18th birthday looms closer, my stepfather approached me for a serious discussion. He casually broached the subject of me starting to pay rent once I come of age if I wish to continue residing in the house. This proposition caught me off guard. Paying rent for my own abode sounded peculiar, to say the least. Therefore, I clarified the situation, explaining to him that the house was, in fact, inherited by me from my late father. To my disbelief, he chuckled, assuming I was jesting. It was incredulous that he was unaware of this fact, so I felt compelled to set the record straight. Upon conferring with my mother, she confirmed that she had never explicitly informed him about the house's ownership. When the realization dawned on him that I was earnest, the atmosphere shifted palpably. He appeared visibly embarrassed but attempted to rationalize his initial request by asserting that he had presumed my mother owned the house. The following morning, there was a discernible tension during breakfast. I decided to confront the issue head-on. I asserted to both of them that since the house rightfully belonged to me, it would be equitable for them to commence paying rent if they intended to stay post my 18th birthday. I sought to reverse roles momentarily, curious about his response given his prior stance on my autonomy. My stepfather was taken aback. He argued that this was unjust and an abrupt alteration to impose without prior notice. He deemed it harsh, emphasizing the importance of not treating family in such a manner. The irony was not lost on me, considering his ease in springing the rent proposition on me just the day before. He endeavored to justify his standpoint by asserting that his original intent was to instill financial responsibility in me and prepare me for adulthood. I countered by questioning how this differed from his situation, living in the house without contributing financially. What lesson did that impart? The debate grew heated. He accused me of harboring spite and seeking retribution. Ultimately, he denounced my behavior as out of line and exited the conversation. Throughout most of the altercation, my mother remained silent. However, afterward, she opined that I had been too harsh on him. While she acknowledged that he shouldn't have requested rent from me, she feared that my reaction was driving a wedge in our family. Despite the confrontation, life resumed its normal course, albeit with an unspoken tension lingering in the air. Over the ensuing weeks, we skirted around the topic, avoiding direct confrontation. I found myself contemplating the dynamics of family and the essence of home. It transcended mere financial matters. It encompassed respect, empathy, and acknowledgement of each other's perspectives and emotions. Consequently, I resolved to engage in another dialogue with my stepfather, albeit with a different approach. I clarified that my intention wasn't to evict them or exact revenge. Rather, I yearned for us to function as a supportive family unit, one that didn't exploit each other. I proposed the possibility of devising a system wherein they contribute towards certain expenses or maintenance costs instead of conventional rent. It would provide an opportunity for all of us to contribute to the upkeep of our household, ensuring its maintenance. The discussion unfolded more smoothly this time around. My stepfather appeared to grasp my perspective, and we mutually agreed to convene with my mother to explore a fair resolution. Ensuring that everyone felt equally treated and that our home remained a welcoming environment was paramount to me. Reflecting on this experience, I gleaned valuable lessons about navigating challenging conversations and advocating for myself. Additionally, I recognized the significance of transparent communication and mutual respect in preserving family cohesion, especially during tumultuous times. Stepping into adulthood was a significant milestone for me, not solely in terms of age, but in comprehending and managing real-world scenarios. Now, regarding some comments questioning my actions, the sentiment of not being the antagonist is prevalent. Charging rent is deemed a customary adult responsibility, not an act of malice. The inconsistency in his stance regarding rental arrangements reflects an unfair double standard. His authority over me, despite not being my biological parent, is questioned, especially in light of his decision to bypass my mother in addressing rent matters. Speculation arises regarding his motives, suggesting a desire to profit unjustly. Criticism is levied against the sudden imposition of change, juxtaposed with his initial demand for rent. Calls for him to shoulder his own financial responsibilities emerge, suggesting the formulation of a formal lease agreement or resorting to eviction if necessary. His newfound advocacy for familial care is viewed with skepticism, juxtaposed with the belief that my mother might have had ulterior motives regarding the house's ownership. Asserting my ownership and standing firm are encouraged, safeguarding against potential exploitation. Transitioning to another narrative, our family encountered a profound hardship a few years ago with the loss of our father to cancer. Prior to marrying our mother, Dad led a vibrant life filled with remarkable escapades. He traversed the country as part of the crew for renowned rock bands, renowned for their flamboyant appearances and energetic performances. Recollections of his youth were peppered with anecdotes of concerts, revelry, and extensive travels, often punctuated with jests about the chaos of those days. Amidst his laughter, a subtle unease about the possibility of undiscovered offspring lingered. Sensing his underlying apprehension, my siblings and I resolved to delve into this matter further. We surmised that a DNA test might unearth any obscured facets of our father's history, though we tempered our expectations, anticipating, at most, the discovery of distant relatives. For years, this remained the extent of our findings until a significant shift occurred with Dad's declining health. Around 6 months before his passing, he had to enter hospice care. We received notification from the DNA testing service, and this time, it wasn't a match with a distant cousin, but with a half-sister who was nearly a decade my senior. The revelation was significant. Her birth timeline aligned perfectly with the period when our father was extensively touring with those rock bands. Prior to responding to her, we felt it imperative to consult with our father, especially given his frail health. Despite his extreme weakness and sickness, the news of a potential other daughter deeply affected him. He broke down in tears, a rare display of vulnerability. Through his tears, he confided that this was his greatest fear. Having a child out there whom he hadn't been present for, whom he hadn't supported. He expressed a fervent desire to speak with her as soon as possible, to reconcile in whatever capacity he could during his remaining days. Upon connecting with our newfound half-sister, the situation took a distressing turn. Despite explaining our father's grave health condition and his recent awareness of her existence, her response was far from empathetic. Instead, she bombarded him with angry phone calls, hurling accusations and questions about why he had abandoned her and her mother, branding him as irresponsible. We stood by helplessly, listening to these agonizing exchanges, urging him to hang up, but he remained steadfast, believing that absorbing her pain and anger was his final offering to her in his dwindling time. Following our father's passing, tensions escalated when we informed her of his death. Her immediate concern shifted to her inheritance, a stark display of her priorities. With his medical bills depleting nearly all his savings, we were left with a mere $11,000 after covering his funeral expenses. I candidly explained the scant remainder and emphasized my dismay at her treatment of our father in his final days. I conveyed my inability to forgive her for adding stress to his already burdened moments, highlighting that her upbringing without him wasn't solely his fault. Her mother played a significant role. Despite the differing opinions of my mother and sisters, who advocate for empathy towards her difficult upbringing, I struggle to reconcile her actions. Tasked with managing our father's estate, I feel a profound obligation to honor his last days, marred by turmoil and regret stemming from those distressing calls. Balancing considerations of fairness, grief, and unresolved family tensions proves to be an arduous endeavor. Turning to external perspectives, the consensus emerges that she displayed a lack of empathy and compassion, prioritizing monetary concerns over familial reconciliation. The responsibility doesn't fall on me to address her demands, as her behavior demonstrates a disregard for the emotional turmoil our father experienced. Encouragement is extended to trust my instincts and refrain from capitulating to her demands, as her actions betray a lack of genuine interest in establishing familial bonds. Despite recognizing her anger, sympathy is withheld given her insensitive and self-serving conduct. However, this isn't your responsibility to shoulder. Story 3. I'm a 40-year-old mother with a delightful 15-year-old daughter named Amy. I've mostly raised her alone. A few years ago, I came out as gay, and last year, I married Jenna, who's 42. Jenna brought her daughter Nora, who's 13, into our family. We all live together under one roof, and I have full custody of Amy. Initially, Amy had to adjust to the idea of having another mother around, but now, they have a great relationship. Our household became livelier because Amy and Nora's birthdays are close, just a couple of days apart. Knowing that Nora has had some trouble making friends, we thought a joint birthday party would help her feel more integrated into our new family setup. Since most of my relatives live abroad, they tend to send gifts ahead of time. This year, they sent a big bag full of gifts about a week before the party. There were at least 20 gifts in there, all wrapped up and ready to bring smiles to the birthday girls' faces. The party itself was a success, with lots of fun, laughter, and cake. After the guests left, and it was just our little family, Jenna started handing out the gifts. She pulled out gift after gift, and we noticed they were all for Amy. After about 12 gifts, I started to feel uneasy. We reached into the bag again and found only one gift left, and it was for Nora. Trying to stay upbeat, Nora opened her gift for my parents, a $15 tumbler from Walmart. You could see her trying to hide her disappointment. It wasn't about the price, but the thought behind it. In contrast, Amy received an array of high-end gifts, gift cards each worth well over $100, a brand new limited edition smartphone, some cool gadgets, fancy designer clothes, and heartfelt birthday cards. Seeing the stark difference in how the gifts were distributed really bothered me. I couldn't help feeling that my family hadn't considered Nora equally, and it seemed unfair, especially seeing her try to brush it off but clearly feeling left out. That night, fueled by a mix of disappointment and mama bear instinct, I took to the family chat. I called out my siblings, parents, and extended family members for not considering Nora and expressed my frustration about the disparity in gifts. I wanted to ensure everyone understood that Nora is just as much a part of our family as Amy and that it's crucial she feels valued and included, especially on occasions like her birthday. After the party, when I confronted my family about the unequal gift giving, they brushed off my concerns. They argued that it wasn't their responsibility to buy gifts for Nora since she isn't directly related to them and felt that Amy deserved her gifts because she was their blood relative. They also mentioned that since I hadn't thrown a separate party for Amy, it was my issue to deal with the dynamics between Jenna and Nora, not theirs. Unfortunately, Nora feeling left out wasn't new. This wasn't the first time she'd been overlooked by my family, which made the whole situation even more painful for her. Wanting to smooth things over, I turned to Amy that night. I asked if she might share just a few of her many gifts with Nora, not everything, just some of the gift cards and a couple of new clothes. To my surprise, Amy was really upset by the suggestion. She had always been about sharing before, and although she and Nora weren't the closest of friends, they generally got along fine. But when I asked her to share, Amy broke down crying. She admitted she had never wanted a joint birthday party initially. She felt I constantly made her share everything with Nora, from their room to parties to sleepovers. If only one of them was invited somewhere, I'd insist neither go unless both were included. Amy expressed wanting something of her own, especially her birthday gifts, which she felt should be solely hers. In response, I scolded her for being selfish and grounded her. I even took a couple of her presents and offered them to Nora, hoping to show some fairness. However, Nora declined them, not wanting to cause more trouble with Amy or feel like she was accepting pity gifts. Since then, Amy has been distant and cold toward all of us. I just wanted to bring my daughters closer together with the joint party and ensure they both felt equally loved and included, but it seems to have backfired, and now I'm unsure how to fix the tension in our family. Am I the a-hole? Clarification. Jen and I bought gifts for the girls, their own tablets, as well as for their friends. Nora also received gifts from her extended family, but they sent for Amy as well. Now for some comments. Yes, you are the a-hole. You're essentially asking your daughter to share her entire identity with Nora, her room, her belongings, her family, her friends, her birthday party, the party she attends, sleepovers. Is there anything really hers? This can't be good for her development. She needs to be her own person. Story 4. So, my husband Finn and I have significantly different salaries. Finn used to make good money, about $44,000 a month, but he decided to go back to school to get a master's degree, which I fully support. However, now he makes much less because the scholarship doesn't cover much. He gets about $2,300, and after paying for school expenses, he's left with only about $1,500 each month. On the other hand, I make more money, about $7,000 a month, so I cover about 90% of our expenses. We keep all our money together in joint accounts, and I'm fully supportive of him pursuing his master's degree because I believe it's crucial for his future. Finn's childhood buddy Marcus was getting married, and Finn was not just a guest but the best man, which is a big deal. He had to organize the bachelor party before the wedding, and although all the friends who were supposed to help promised to chip in for the party costs, many didn't actually pay up. They just ignored Finn's messages about the money, leaving him to foot most of the bill, which ended up being around $2,000. Finn came to me a bit stressed and asked if I could cover the bachelor party expenses since I had some money set aside. I agreed to help him out and also gave him $1,500 in cash to keep on hand for any emergency situations, just a little extra backup. Cut to the wedding day. There's this tradition at some weddings where they cut the groom's tie and go around to the guests asking for money, kind of like a fun way to collect a wedding gift on the spot. When it was time for Finn and Marcus to come to our table, Finn decided to use the $500 emergency cash I gave him. He thought it would be a cool move to show his support by putting all that cash on Marcus's tie. Everyone was cheering, and it seemed like a fun moment, but inside, I was really not happy. That money was meant for actual emergencies, not just as a showy gift at a party. It felt like the money we really needed to keep just in case was used up in a way that wasn't planned. After Finn used the emergency cash at the wedding, things got a bit tense between us. He came back to our table about half an hour later, and I immediately told him that the $1,500 I gave him was meant for real emergencies, not for showing off in front of a crowd. He argued that since the money was from our joint funds, he also had the right to decide how to use it, especially if it was to help a friend like Marcus. I tried to explain that while our shared expenses and emergency funds are indeed for both of us, using that money just to look good in front of others felt wrong to me. I told him, in situations like that, the money felt more like it was mine, and I wanted it back. I reminded him that we had already covered the bachelor party costs, which was more than enough financial support for the wedding. We ended up arguing, and the rest of the week was pretty rough between us. I was firm about wanting the $1,500 back, even though Finn felt I was being unfair or manipulative, especially since I financially support his studies, and he relies on me a lot right now. I knew asking for the money back might seem petty since he doesn't have much to spare, but it was important to me that we use our emergency funds only for real emergencies, or at least discuss such big spending decisions together first. Am I the a-hole? Now for some comments. Minimum wage here is $12.200. I think asking for him to take it back is a bit much. However, I do think he should make it up somehow. Can he sell some belongings or get a part-time job? Not the a-hole because your husband is behaving immaturely. He needs to accept that your joint financial situation is not great right now, and you being all right with shouldering more expenses now for long-term joint gain is not a license for him to spend on his buddies like he's still bringing in a good paycheck. In the meantime, stop giving him so much for emergencies. I have a feeling the problem with your husband goes far beyond this. He's living beyond his means, and that spells a ton of future trouble if you do not separate your finances now. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. But you might want to cut your losses or speak to the groom himself and explain the situation. Even if you didn't intend for that money to be spent that way, asking for a wedding gift back is in bad taste. If you really have to have it back, go to the guy himself. If they're a decent person, they'll understand. Story 5. I'm the owner of a business where 15 people work. I prefer not to share what kind of business it is, But despite some tough times, it's doing pretty well. I have 3 kids, 24, 22, and 21 years old, from my first marriage. I also have a stepson named Josh, who is 18 years old. When I mention stepson, I just mean that Josh is my wife's son from before I met her, but to me, he's just like my own son. Back when my first 3 kids were younger, I had a rule. If they ever wanted to work at my business, I would set up a real job interview for them. They didn't know that I planned to hire them regardless of how the interview went. I wanted them to have the experience of a job interview because it's good practice. They learn what it's like and feel more prepared for the future in case they wanted to try different careers. 2 of my kids like the idea and still work with me today. 8 years ago, I met the woman who would become my current wife. She introduced me to her son Josh about a year after we met. Before she let me meet Josh, she was really clear about wanting to know what role he'd have in my life. I promised her that I would treat him just like my own child. We got married a year later, and from that day, Josh started calling me Dad. He's never known his biological father, who left because he didn't want children, so for Josh to call me Dad is something I consider a great honor. My eldest 3 kids have welcomed him as their brother from the start. They include him in everything they do, like going on trips, watching movies, or just hanging out at home. He's 100% part of our family, and everyone treats him like he's always been there. This setup has helped us build a strong, united family where everyone supports each other, no matter what. It's been great seeing all of them grow up, make decisions together, and become close as siblings. After my wife and I got married, I offered the same opportunity to Josh that I had given to my other kids. I told him that if he ever wanted to work at my business, I would set up a job interview for him, just like I did for his siblings. Recently, Josh finished his last year of high school and was unsure about whether to go to university or start working. After thinking it over during the summer holidays, which just started, he decided that university wasn't the right path for him right now, and that he'd rather get a job. So, he came to me and asked if I could arrange a job interview for him at my company. I happily agreed. What I haven't told him yet is that he's going to get the job no matter how the interview goes. I think it's important for him to go through the process of an interview to gain some experience and confidence. However, when I discussed this plan with my wife, she was really upset. She felt that by making Josh go through an interview, I wasn't treating him the same way as my biological kids, even though this was exactly what I had done for them. I explained to her that Josh already has the job, but I believe that having an interview experience would be beneficial for him, just as it was for his siblings. My wife thinks that since Josh is the youngest, maybe it would be fairer to just give him the job without an interview, especially since he's shown interest and initiative by asking for it. She's been quite unhappy with me for the past couple of days because of this disagreement. I'm trying to balance being fair to all my children while also preparing them for the real world, and it's tricky when you're blending a family with different expectations and perspectives. I hope we can resolve this soon, as it's important for all of us to be on the same page and support each other. Now for some comments. Not the a-hole. You are being extremely reasonable. It's honestly a bit alarming that she would have that reaction and say that you don't treat him like your son, despite 8 years of doing just that, over a job interview. He isn't bothered by it. You've done it for all your kids. Maybe she has something else bothering her because it is hard to justify her response here. Not the a-hole. You are quite literally treating your stepson the way you treated your biological children, and being the youngest doesn't entitle him to special privileges. I genuinely don't see why your wife is upset. Not the a-hole at all. He is being given a job, and you're helping him get some real-life experience. He's getting the exact same treatment that your other kids received. Your wife's behavior is just plain weird here.